Recently, a Twitter post has been blowing up, along with several videos covering this, specifically Team Samurai X1. The question being, why doesn't Yu-Gi-Oh! Have the same longevity as Pokemon? Pokemon, as many of you know, is the #1 highest grossing franchise on Earth. Literally, that's not an exaggeration. More than any video game, movie, cartoon, pretty much anything. More than Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, James Bond, Mario, and even Disney. Yes, the media conglomerate Disney. A little yellow mouse and a 10-year-old boy who never grew up. It's a simple formula, but in its simplicity is the genius. It's a timeless franchise, really, like Looney Tunes. Pokemon really is the top dog of all media franchises. In the other corner, we have Yu-Gi-Oh! To many kids, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon were companion shows, as both had cards, both were anime, and dubbed by 4Kids. However, one of these got propelled to superstardom, and while the other definitely has its base, it's nowhere near Pokemon despite a similar foundation. So why did one of these series take off like wildfire, while the other one had its time but then kind of just went away?
This is my Valentine, and you're watching Stephen Blocker's channel.
Well, went away isn't really fair, because this isn't some one-hit wonder. But it's definitely not as popular as it once was. However, Yu-Gi-Oh! Itself is still a juggernaut. We're going to go through the timeline and see each pothole in the road that slowed the Yu-Gi-Oh! Race car down. Who am I? My name is Steven. If you've seen any of my videos, you know I'm a Yu-Gi-Oh! Superfan. It's my favorite franchise and easily my all-time favorite anime. However, I was also super into Pokemon. I would watch it every time it came on. I collected a lot of the toys, I played a lot of the video games. I would watch that show religiously. Like, to the point I woke up early before school just to watch it. I even recorded episodes on VHS. Yes, I am that old. I'm not here to trash one series and boost another. I'm not biased to either of them. While Yu-Gi-Oh! Definitely is my personal favorite, I like both. What is my position? It was never meant to compete. Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon are actually so different that one of them was meant to be a long-lasting franchise from the start, with mass-market capabilities, while the other was just not. Superficial qualities that I'll get into today will show why I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Was never really even meant to be Pokemon's rival. They shouldn't be compared. And starting from the beginning, the foundation was shaky. So let's see from a fan's perspective where it all went wrong on the timeline. This is all my opinion. Now, Pokemon itself had a slight head start, as the first game was really successful on Game Boy, while Yu-Gi-Oh! Didn't actually take off until the anime and manga. However, they both have a similar foundation. Both had a mega popular anime that was brought over by 4Kids, kickstarted card games that were basically money printers, and had a plethora of merchandise possibilities and iconic opening theme songs. But here's where the problem starts. Yu-Gi-Oh! As an anime was very popular. So was Pokemon, and arguably at this time they were about the same. But Yu-Gi-Oh!'s biggest issue was content-wise, it had to be changed a lot more frequently. Pokemon had very little edits that were rating and content related. You know, mostly stuff like guns being edited out and the Porygon episode, but aside from that, most of Pokemon's edits were cultural references. Yu-Gi-Oh! However was always much darker, so they had to invent stuff like shadow boxes and dark energy discs, and even invent the whole concept of a shadow realm that was relevant through the whole series. But that's the thing. Yu-Gi-Oh! Always had a level of maturity to it. Look at all the cards that had to be censored for showing too much skin, or because of occult and religious reasons. You know, it's actually kind of a miracle they were even able to get this series here at all with that stuff. Plus the death games in the anime. This show covered a lot of heavy stuff. While Pokemon did have sad moments and dark moments, it was a lot just cute monsters battling. In my opinion, this is the moment where it started. At this point, the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Had ended. 4Kids tried to revive it with a short spin-off called Capsule Monsters, but aside from that, there was nothing with the original cast anymore. All the characters you grew to love, gone. No more My Valentine, no more Weevil, no more Mako, no more Rex, nobody. I think this was the start. Because after this, all new content revolved entirely around new casts. But people got attached to these characters and they couldn't really do more with them, since Atem, who was a big part of the franchise, was permanently gone and couldn't be brought back, unless they pulled a he got out of the cock-a-doodle car. Meanwhile with Pokemon it was the opposite. For at least 2 decades, Ash and Pikachu were always constant. Atem leaving would be like a Pikachu left. And yes, that's right. This series became old enough to drink before getting rid of Ash and Pikachu. It finally happened, but fans got 2 decades, thousands of episodes and movies with their favorite characters. Yu-Gi-Oh, however, unfortunately only got 4 movies. One of which was based around Season 0, which never actually came here. Another was released over a decade after the series had ended here in the United States, and the other being a short spin-off crossover movie. Pokemon, however, had 20 movies to this day. While sure, Ash's Pokemon came and went, but so did Yuki's monsters. He always had Dark Magician. After a while, we said goodbye to the Duelist Kingdom roster of cards, and he had a whole new deck. And Pokemon, they lost characters like Misty and Dawn and Max, but Ash and Pikachu always stayed along. So okay, we have GX, an all-new cast, and lots of people like GX, but if you're like me, you miss the cast you grew up with. This kind of spin-off is not very common, especially in animation. I mean, the only one I can really think of is Batman Beyond, but that's really it. Also, over the next 25 years, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has changed protagonists 7 times. There have been 8 different series as of writing this. Pokemon? Never. Up until recently, Pokemon fans have always had Ash and Pikachu. So that's 8 new casts we as Yu-Gi-Oh! Fans have to both get acquainted to and then say goodbye to for the new cast to come in. Now, credit where credit is due, GX definitely has some goodwill for Duel Monsters fans with the cameos in the series. But most of us didn't want cameos, we wanted more of them. And I guess Karibo theoretically could have been the Pikachu of the series. He's cute, he was common in all the arcs in the original, had a lot of moments to shine, he was even given to Jade and Yugi by an adult Yugi. But it's kind of the issue WWE always runs into. Nobody can ever really match the star power of the megastars like Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold, The Rock. Those are the peak years and most people go unknown by many casual fans. In fact, that's mostly why the nostalgia packs based on old characters tend to sell the best. I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh! Itself is a lot like wrestling in a way. Every 5 years it changes with a full new main cast. But Yu-Gi-Oh's animated so it can be helped. Pokemon, however, is a lot like Sesame Street, or really any other cartoon. You'll always have the same principal cast. 4Kids themselves also made a lot of bad choices with Yu-Gi-Oh! As well, like not finishing the dub of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and then the series after 5Ds just kinda airing in obscurity. There was also the lack of merchandise. After Duel Monsters ended, they kinda just stopped doing much in the way of marketing this series. I mean, I remember Duel Monsters airing super late at like 3 AM in 2007, 2008, 2009. I remember seeing it then. But Pokemon, they got a primetime slot on Boomerang. Now, of course, I'm sure it aired on other channels, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Kind of just disappeared for a while. And of course, there was also all the legal stuff that 4Kids got into, with the lawsuits and losing the rights to Pokemon. However, Pokemon also had Nintendo to fall back on, and being part of that family really helped out a lot. Yu-Gi-Oh! However, had Konami to fall back on, which honestly hasn't really been the best with a lot of their franchises, but the less said about that, the better. Now, was Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters ending a bad thing? Not at all. I'll get into it, but really I do think the cast changing was definitely a rung on the ladder. But that gets us into the next part. Pokemon was set up from the start to have longevity. What's the first thing you hear about Pokemon? Gotta catch them all. 4 simple words. It's what the games were about. It's what the anime was about. There were originally 151 Pokemon. Therefore, the goal was to catch them all at the end, right? However, even in the very first episode, Ash sees the monster Ho-Oh. So we knew right from episode 1, day 1, there was more than meets the eye. More Pokemon to catch. So yeah, they kept adding new Pokemon. A lot of new Pokemon for Ash to catch. Now let's look at Yugioh. Yugioh had a goal from the beginning, separating Atem from Yugi so he can grow into his own man and collecting the Millennium items. By the end, Atem was gone, the dark magic rule in the Shadow Games had been purged, and Bakura had been banished, meaning the show had nothing left to do. Imagine if at the end of Dragon Ball Z the Dragon Balls just stopped working and they had peace on Earth forever. There really was just no way to continue the story after that, as most later revamps ignore that ending. Capsule Monsters, for example, still includes Atem. Bonds Beyond Time didn't really use Yugi other than being a partner in the duel. And Dark Side of Dimensions is the only real attempt to tell a sequel story, and that was well done for sure, but big problem. That movie's story could only work for a movie, and I just cannot see them making a full series about that story. So that's the big disconnect. Pokemon was set up to go on forever, while Yu-Gi-Oh! Was not. Yu-Gi-Oh's mangaka, Kazuki Takahashi, had a story to tell. He told his story and ended it where he felt appropriate. Could they have done more with Yu-Gi-Oh? Possibly, but the anime had a lot of finality to it. Pokemon, however, always left itself open quite a bit. There's a ton of variety in the locations and stories of Pokemon. Much like James Bond and Looney Tunes in a lot of ways, where you have episodes of vastly different settings and tones, like a whole episode about a psychic named Sabrina that's a lot more horror in tone, or a lot more sad episodes like leaving Pikachu behind with his own kind. Yu-Gi-Oh! Never really got all wacky and out there with its stories. Aside from filler, there weren't really any non-sequiturs. Pokemon had some continuity, but there was also a lot of episodic moments. Yu-Gi-Oh! However, mostly stuck to its story structure and focused on telling one cohesive story. And that's really the gap. Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon were never meant to be compared. Pokemon was a game about collecting creatures that got adapted into a kid's anime from the start. It was intended to be how it became. Yu-Gi-Oh! On the other hand, was a manga that was in the shonen demographic. It was meant to be more in line with the likes of Dragon Ball, just without the fighting and a protagonist who used games to do combat. The only thing they really had in common were card games and potentially cute critters. Like, they're not even the same genre. Pokemon is in the kids genre and Yu-Gi-Oh! Shonen. The only reason we compare them is because 4Kids licensed both and treated Yu-Gi-Oh! Like it was Pokemon 2.0 after striking gold with the anime, and saw mass market appeal in cards that could sell. Seriously, show someone Season 0 of Yu-Gi-Oh! And ask if this will ever become a kids show like it did. Multimedia potential. So Pokemon was literally made for toys. It's like Saturday morning cartoon from the 80s level of toys. Yu-Gi-Oh! Also had toys. I mean, everyone remembers the Dual Disc set and various Happy Meal promotions and random figures. Pokemon, however, has always pushed its book fairs. My 10-year-old eyes lit up when I saw this in my local book fair. It was the first thing on the video package we saw, a Scholastic-sponsored Pokemon book. Yu-Gi-Oh! Didn't have one that year. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh! Did have Scholastic books, but I didn't see those till a lot later. Related to the point I made about 4Kids earlier, between 2007 and 2011, they just stopped. This was around the time the early 2000s anime boom had ended. Toonami ended its broadcast run, Tokyo Pop had been shut down, 4Kids was out of the licensing game. Around this time, anime being a Saturday morning cartoon toy commercial, just like a series from the 1980s, was over. Pokemon is pretty much the last stand and the sole survivor for this. Even to this day, as the Funimation method of just dubbing a series has pretty much become the standard now. Yu-Gi-Oh! Merchandise from this point was all limited to cards. Very rarely there were figures, but they were mostly for collectors, not really casual fans. But I mean, anime fans' standards have changed. They wanted better, more accurate dubs, not the old dubs that were sanitized. However, Out with that was the merchandise-driven nature of these dubs. Anime merch had limited itself to figures and model kits. Because, in the old days, you had school stationery and backpacks. However, once 4Kids was gone, that was gone too. Video games. Tie-in video games are probably the most important thing a long-running franchise can have. SpongeBob has like 30 games. Star Wars and almost all these other big franchises have at least a few. So let's compare the two. Pokemon video games and Yu-Gi-Oh video games. Pokemon games can be very chill, very pick up and play. They're RPGs, but simple enough as RPGs that anyone can do it. Now of course, there is a skill level, but overall Pokemon tends to be fairly low-key, simple and fun. It's a formula that stood the test of time. As you can tell by how many Pokemon games got Player's Choice bestseller ratings. Yu-Gi-Oh games never really did. Frostbound Kingdom did. Duels to the Roses got greatest hits on PS2, but that's really it. Capsule Monsters Coliseum didn't, mostly because I think people were turned off by how difficult Duels to the Roses was. It was a million seller all because of the anime. I'm gonna be very honest. Yu-Gi-Oh video games are genuinely just not meant for the target demographic. 4Kids made the series dubbed for kids, specifically grade school kids. But the problem is, these games tend to be way too complicated for the target audience. I genuinely can't think of any Yu-Gi-Oh game that I could easily beat when I was a kid. I never beat any of them, as they rely on hidden secrets and mechanics that are not well explained. Without guides, I never would have figured out the fusions in these games, or the evolution in Capsule Monsters, or the roaming monsters in Frostbound Kingdom. Like, even the games are super different from the trading card game. And this isn't a get good issue. Imagine being in the demographic for Yu-Gi-Oh! And playing some of these games. It aired at TVY7, so imagine being an elementary schooler and trying to figure this out. It's not just that Yu-Gi-Oh! Itself is hard, but these games tend to over-rely on the Japanese trend of hidden obscure secrets as gameplay. For example, Forbidden Memories has an impossibly high grind, and objectively broken and rigged duels. Look at this, it costs you almost 1 million star chips to get one monster. Who's going to be able to do that? Duels to the Roses gives you the most pitiful starter decks possible, that are so broken and underpowered, you could hobble yourself before you even start the game. Like, you can't check the contents, you get vague information that is actually inaccurate, and images that won't mean anything unless you're well versed with the types of cards in the game. It's just pictures of symbols representing the types. That tells you nothing. Even if you are familiar with the game, you might not even know what these symbols mean. Both these games make you over-rely on fusions that you aren't even told about. Everyone knows Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories as that twin-headed Thunder Dragon game. And don't even get me started on the secrets in some of these games. They're all insane and obscure. For example, Duels to the Roses, you can't even get 1/8 of the cards without a cheat device. They are completely blocked off to you through all normal ways. Which kind of takes the card collecting aspect out of it. Frostbound Kingdom has Moisture Creature, one of the most obscure secrets in video game history. And roaming monsters you can only get with certain characters and certain monsters. You have to roam around these whole levels, experimenting with all the characters in your roster, and use all the monsters in hopes of finding everything. There's no hints for any of this. And don't even get me started on Moisture Creature. I kid you not, it's easier to get Missing No. It is the hardest secret I've ever had to come across in any video game. I have come across secret glitches that are easier to find than this monster. So yeah, imagine being a grade schooler in 2002, with no internet and having to figure this crap out on your own. Now, this kind of gameplay style, however, does work. Several games use it, especially Japanese games like RPGs. But those games are geared towards typically adults, or at least teenagers with experience with this kind of game. It is fairly standard in Japanese games like, for example, Mystery Quest and Milan's Secret Castle. But tell me, how many kids, US kids, could figure this out? I was 6 at the time I got into Yu-Gi-Oh! And my experience with video games was platformers, and literally like baby games. Especially since these games either lack tutorials completely or have god-awful poor tutorials. But really, it's not just the difficulty. Pokemon games basically let you become Ash, but in your own way. You can pick your own monsters and level them up how you like, and go through your own Pokemon journey. And then you had games like Pokemon Stadium that let you take your Pokemon off the Game Boy card and let you see them in full 3D and battle with them. Yu-Gi-Oh games don't really offer much in the way of an authentic experience of duels, tournaments, challenging opponents, buying cards. Often Yu-Gi-Oh games tend to go for weird spin-offs not even featuring dueling at all. One cool thing about these games is that they often include a password system to let you bring in your real-life cards into the game. Sometimes at least, which is cool, but often has caveats. However, are there any Yu-Gi-Oh games that let you roleplay like you're in the show? Not really. Imagine a big, full RPG world with Yu-Gi-Oh characters. You can walk around and interact with them and challenge and duel who you like. Oh, well, I guess that game did get made. Imagine if this game came out for Duel Monsters. Now that game would be the #1 best-selling Yu-Gi-Oh game of all time. The closest I can really think of is Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Cards, which recreates Battle City's story for the most part. You can interact with people, challenge who you want, and there's a story. The only problem? It's on a handheld. Imagine this game on a console. The rest of the games, not so much. Duels to the Roses is set in Europe and features past incarnations of the Yu-Gi-Oh cast role-playing as historical figures. Forbidden Memories is set in Egypt for most of its gameplay, with past versions of the characters showing up for the most part. Capsule Monster Coliseum, in my opinion, finally gets it right. You're in a tournament. It's fully voiced over. You're dueling against the main cast.
Your first, but it will definitely not be your last.
Ooh, tough. But things will only get tougher for you.
Imagine if Yu-Gi-Oh games had stories like the first Dragon Ball Z Budokai, where it's faithfully recreated with very well-made cutscenes and fully voiced over. Yu-Gi-Oh games almost never have voices, let alone cutscenes. It's almost always visual novel-style dialogue boxes.
Long time no see! Yugi. If you want to get your grubby little hands on the tournament title, you'll have to go through me!
Then that's what I'll do, Weevil. I'll take you on any time, any place.
This is another area where Pokemon won the longevity battle. The game just had more longevity and be picked up by anybody. I got better at Yu-Gi-Oh games finally as an adult, when I understood RPGs more. Not to mention, these games kinda just went away. The Tag Force series became prominent with Yu-Gi-Oh GX, but that was it. You had Legacy of the Duelist, which came much later, but they never really tried to do much else with it. I mean, there were mobile games. Duel Links was fun, but Pokemon Go had that one beat. And now a big one. The card game. But mechanically, from what I've seen, it hasn't really changed that much. Plus, they also rotate the format, which Yu-Gi-Oh desperately needs. And Pokemon's power creep is mostly just numerical, with health points and damage numbers being inflated from the early days. Yu-Gi-Oh? Oh boy, it is not beginner friendly whatsoever. The days of LARPing in the show with character decks are over, if you want to play competitively at least. It started off fairly simple, but then it started introducing all these new card types and summoning mechanics. It even changed the layout of the board at one point. They really felt like the Sega CD and 32X, but in card game form. I feel bad for people who have to learn the basic rules and then learn about pendulums and synchros and XCs and all this other stuff. I just want to say I'm sorry anyone has to learn all this stuff. I really am. Yu-Gi-Oh has really turned a lot of the casual players away. Like, honestly, many duels feel like just watching someone play solitaire. You don't get a turn. There's not really even a competitive aspect anymore of reacting to your opponent's cards and outplaying them. You just lock them out of playing entirely with floodgates, control decks, or OTKs. Like, sometimes you can't even play. That's caused a lot of the casual players to quit or never even take up the game. And that's not ignoring the price points. Yu-Gi-Oh cards are a lot more expensive than Pokemon cards, especially meta cards. Plus, Pokemon cards are sold way more often than Yu-Gi-Oh cards, to the point that lately, some stores don't even sell them. Was there ever a chance for Yu-Gi-Oh to maintain with Pokemon? Likely not, with the reasons stated above. Unless they went a different direction and tried to revamp the original series, which would have been tough considering how it ended, getting rid of its primary protagonist, antagonist, and even the driving force. Plus, looking back, Pokemon was always the more culturally significant one. I remember as late as 2006, I saw Pikachu being an option in a tattoo shop. I was on vacation in Florida. I would have been about 9 at this point. My family walked past this tattoo shop, and I remember looking in the window. They had a display of sample tattoos they did at the shop, and Pikachu was one of the stencils, along with a certain bunny. If you know what I'm talking about. I mean, I just remember seeing that and thinking it was really weird, you know? I mean, I feel like Pikachu himself is just one of those iconic characters. He's like Hello Kitty or Mickey Mouse. Another signed Pokemon was going to win this race. Of every anime movie ever released in the United States, Pokemon's first movie was the highest grossing. Not even adjusting for inflation, it made $85 million. That record stood until last year with Demon Slayer Infinity Castle. Let's put this into perspective with other anime. That's more money than any Studio Ghibli movie, every Dragon Ball Z movie, even beating out modern releases like Chainsaw Man and The Boy and the Heron. It's also the oldest movie on that list. And that's not even mentioning the first Pokemon movie actually beat out several popular Western cartoon movies in the United States. It beat out the SpongeBob movie, many Disney movies like The Fox and the Hound, and Beavis and Butthead Do America. Right above it was Peter Pan by just $2 million. Now that could be a fluke, right? Well, 2 more spots are taken by Pokemon, that being 2005th place with $43 million, and the third Pokemon movie in 13th place at $17 million. Also in the top 50 you have 2 more Pokemon movies not mentioned, but these ones only grossed $1 million and $750,000 apiece, so I won't be talking about them. Yu-Gi-Oh's first movie, on the other hand, Pyramid of Light, is currently at 10th place at $19 million, beating the third Pokemon movie. Respectable. But it also shows that Pokemon might have had the advantage from the start. How do the other Yu-Gi-Oh movies do? Well, Dark Side of Dimensions is below 3 Pokemon movies, but it beats 1, while Bonds Beyond Time never cracked the list. Plus, Yu-Gi-Oh never beat any of the top 100 animated film grosses in general. So I mean, Pokemon was able to compete with SpongeBob. Yu-Gi-Oh did well amongst other anime movies. Yu-Gi-Oh did not compete with Pokemon because it was never meant to. There's not really a fair comparison because these series have nothing in common to make them competitive. It did compete at times, but a lot of that is due to 4Kids just being really good at marketing. Yu-Gi-Oh itself was fairly advanced and mature. It was turned into a kids show because executives saw money in it. And this honestly was just bound to happen. Pokemon kept people with a simple and consistent formula that people could show new stuff to their kids for years. Now I'm sure it seems like I've come down really hard on Yu-Gi-Oh! Well, I guess I have, but none of these are critiques or why I hate the show. It's more so why I don't think Yu-Gi-Oh! Had the longevity of Pokemon. Yu-Gi-Oh! Generally just grew up and became more teen and adult heavy, while Pokemon pretty much just stayed how it started, for family and to be accessible for all ages. Yu-Gi-Oh! In conclusion was just never meant to compete with Pokemon, and that's okay. It doesn't mean Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a failure, and I wouldn't trade my memories for anything in the world of either of these shows. Thank you for watching. This has been The Blocker.